The gavel cracked like a gunshot, and 300 pairs of eyes turned toward the woman in handcuffs. Nora Elise Hartwell stood before the bench, her shoulders squared despite the steel biting into her wrists. The fluorescent lights of the Chicago courthouse washed everything in sterile white, bleaching the color from faces that had already decided she was guilty. The judge, a woman whose nameplate read Honorable Patricia Vance, adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. Grand larceny in the first degree. The evidence is substantial. Miss Hartwell, you are remanded to Cook County Jail pending sentencing. Maximum exposure 10 years. The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged toward the barrier. But Nora didn't look at them. Her gaze fixed on a single point at the back of the gallery where an older man with silver hair had just risen to his feet. Malcolm Theodore Ashford, 68 years old, billionaire real estate magnate. A man whose name graced half the skyline visible through the courthouse windows. His face had gone the color of ash. Your Honor, his voice cut through the chaos, deep and hoarse. I was wrong. About everything. Judge Vance's gavel came down again. Mr. Ashford, sit down or I'll have you removed. But Malcolm didn't sit. He stared at Nora, and for the first time since the trial began, she saw something other than betrayal in his eyes. She saw recognition. She saw grief. The bailiff moved toward him. Malcolm raised one hand, not in surrender, but in something closer to supplication, then sank back into the pew. The judge nodded to the officers flanking Nora. They began to lead her away. As she passed the gallery, Malcolm reached out, fingers trembling, but didn't touch her. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear over the din. The heavy door closed behind her. The noise of the courtroom became muffled, distant. Nora exhaled a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. One of the officers, a woman with kind eyes and a tired face, glanced at her. You okay, hon? Nora nodded, though nothing about the motion felt convincing. The officer's radio crackled. They turned down a corridor lined with holding cells. Through a narrow window, Nora caught a glimpse of Lake Michigan, gray and endless under the October sky. But to understand how we got here, she whispered to no one, you'd have to go back 6 weeks, back to when I still believed the world had rules. 6 weeks earlier. The alarm on Nora's phone went off at 4:30 in the morning, a shrill beep that shattered the silence inside the 2008 Honda Civic. She jolted awake, her breath fogging the windshield. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then the ache in her lower back reminded her parked in the employee lot behind the Crescent Room, third night in a row. She'd lost the apartment 2 weeks ago. The car was all she had left. She killed the alarm and sat up, rubbing her eyes. Through the window, the Chicago skyline glowed against the pre-dawn darkness, a wall of glass and steel that belonged to people who would never sleep in their cars. People like Malcolm Ashford, whose name was etched into the side of the tallest building she could see from here. Ashford Tower, 47 stories of polished granite and hubris. Nora grabbed her backpack from the passenger seat and stepped out into the October chill. The lot was empty except for a catering truck idling near the service entrance. She locked the car, a habit that felt absurd given that everything she owned could fit in 2 duffel bags, and headed inside. The kitchen of the Crescent Room smelled like rising dough and espresso. The morning prep crew was already at work chopping vegetables and firing up the ovens. Nora slipped past them, nodding to Miguel, the sous chef, who didn't acknowledge her. She wasn't kitchen staff. She was front of house, which meant she was invisible until the dining room opened. The employee bathroom was a cramped closet with a flickering bulb and a mirror that had seen better decades. Nora locked the door and stripped out of the hoodie and leggings she'd slept in. She washed her face in the sink using hand soap because she'd run out of anything better, then pulled on her uniform black slacks, white button-down black tie. The shirt was wrinkled, but she smoothed it as best she could. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and hollow-eyed. 27 years old, and she looked 40. Around her neck hung a silver locket, tarnished and dented. She touched it out of habit, her thumb tracing the engraved initials on the front, CEA. She'd worn it every day since she could remember, though she didn't know who CEA was. The woman at the orphanage who'd given it to her sister Catherine, ancient and arthritic, had said it came with Nora when she arrived as an infant. Your mother wanted you to have it, she'd said, though she'd never explained how she knew that. Nora tucked the locket beneath her shirt and tied her dark hair into a bun. Presentable, professional, desperate. By 5:15 she was on the floor setting tables. The Crescent Room didn't officially open until 11, but the prep work took hours. White tablecloths had to be pressed silverware, polished wine glasses inspected for spots. Bernard Klein, the general manager, was a tyrant about details. He prowled the dining room like a predator, his sharp eyes catching every crooked fork, every fingerprint on a glass. Bernard was 58, balding, with a face like a hatchet and a voice that could strip paint. He'd worked in high-end hospitality for 30 years and treated the restaurant like it was his personal fiefdom. Nora had been on his staff for 14 months, and in that time he'd never once called her by name. She was you, or the girl, or when he was feeling generous, Hartwell. This morning he cornered her by the hostess stand. "Hartwell, Table 12 needs water glasses. And don't drag your feet, we've got VIPs tonight." Nora nodded and moved toward the storage room. VIPs meant rich people. Rich people meant good tips, which meant she might actually make rent on the storage unit where she'd stashed her duffel bags, if she was lucky. "Oh, and Hartwell," Bernard's voice stopped her. "Try to look less homeless. You're scaring the clientele." She turned, but he'd already walked away. The lunch shift was brutal. The Crescent Room catered to Chicago's elite corporate lawyers, investment bankers, politicians who smiled for cameras and knifed each other in private. Nora moved through the tables like a ghost refilling water, taking orders, clearing plates. The guests didn't see her. They saw the uniform. They saw the function. One man snapped his fingers at her and didn't look up from his phone when she approached. "Sparkling water, no ice, and tell the kitchen my steak was overcooked." She delivered the message. The kitchen sent out a new steak. The man didn't say thank you. By 2 o'clock her feet were numb and her back screamed with every step. She retreated to the break room, a windowless box with a folding table and a vending machine that only took exact change. She slumped into a plastic chair and pulled out her phone. $42 in her checking account. The storage unit fee was due in 3 days, $60. She did the math in her head, then stopped because it only made her nauseous. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Final notice. $45,238.67 owed to University of Illinois Medical Center. Payment required or account will be sent to collections. Nora closed her eyes. Evan. 2 years gone and still haunting her bank account. Her brother adoptive, but the only family that mattered, had died of leukemia at 19. The treatments had bankrupted them both. Nora had dropped out of nursing school in her 3rd year to take care of him, working doubles to pay for the drugs insurance wouldn't cover. It hadn't been enough. Evan died anyway, and the hospital didn't care that she'd tried. She deleted the text and stood. Break was over. At 6:30, Bernard gathered the evening staff in the kitchen. There were 8 of them, 5 servers, 2 bussers, 1 sommelier. Bernard held a clipboard and looked like he was about to announce war. "Listen up. Tonight we've got Ashford Enterprises in the private dining room, Malcolm Ashford himself plus his business partner and a guest. I don't care if you're Mother Teresa, you do not approach that table unless summoned. Understood?" Everyone nodded. Nora's stomach tightened. Malcolm Ashford. She'd heard the name before, seen it on buildings in the news. He owned half the city, and according to Bernard, he was about to own the Crescent Room too. "One more thing." Bernard's gaze landed on her. "Hartwell, you're not serving tonight. You're on standby. Stay in the back and keep your head down." Heat flooded her face. Standby meant no tips. It meant she'd spend the next 6 hours polishing silverware while the other servers racked up hundreds. She opened her mouth to protest, then saw the look in Bernard's eyes. He wanted her to argue. He wanted an excuse to fire her. She closed her mouth and nodded. The private dining room was located on the 2nd floor, accessible via a spiral staircase tucked behind the bar. Nora wasn't supposed to go up there, but at 7:45, one of the servers, a guy named Todd, who'd been hired 3 weeks ago and already made more in tips than she did in a month, appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his face flushed. "I need backup. The kid up there is freaking out and spilling everything." Bernard materialized from nowhere. "What kid?" "Ashford's guest brought a little boy. He's deaf or something, knocked over a water carafe, and now the woman's losing her mind." Bernard swore under his breath and turned to Nora. "You. Get up there and clean it up. Do not speak unless spoken to." She grabbed a towel and a tray and climbed the stairs. The private dining room was all dark wood and low lighting designed to make powerful people feel more powerful. A single round table dominated the space set for 3 adults and 1 child. The child, a boy, maybe 7 years old, sat rigid in his chair, his hands balled into fists. Water dripped from the edge of the table onto the floor. A crystal carafe lay shattered near his feet. Standing over him was a woman in her 50s, rail-thin and immaculate in a navy suit. Her face was twisted with fury. "Incompetent little—" She cut herself off when she saw Nora. "Finally, clean this up, and get him another glass, if he can manage not to destroy it." Nora knelt and began picking up the shards. The boy watched her, his dark eyes wide and wet. He was small for his age, his shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself disappear. His hands moved suddenly, shaping signs in the air. ASL, American Sign Language. Nora froze. The boy signed again, faster this time, his fingers trembling. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." She glanced up at the woman who was now on her phone, her back turned. Then she looked at the boy and signed back, "It's okay. Accidents happen." His mouth fell open. The woman spun around. "What are you doing?" Nora stood, the towel in her hands. "I'm cleaning up, ma'am." "You were making hand gestures at him." "He was apologizing. I told him it's okay." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You know sign language?" "Yes." "How convenient." The woman's voice dripped with contempt. She turned to the man sitting at the head of the table. Nora hadn't noticed him before. Malcolm Ashford, silver hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of winter sky. He looked older than the photos she'd seen, his face lined with exhaustion. "Malcolm, did you hear this? The help speaks sign language. What are the odds?" Malcolm's gaze flicked to Nora, then away. "Leave it, Vivian." Vivian. The woman's name tasted bitter just hearing it. She stepped closer to Nora, invading her space. "You think you're clever, don't you? Staring at Mr. Ashford, learning his grandson's language, angling for attention." "I wasn't—" The slap came before Nora could finish. It wasn't hard, but the shock of it sent her stumbling back. The towel fell from her hands. The room went silent except for the ringing in Nora's ears. Vivian's voice was ice. "Know your place?" Nora's cheek burned. Her hands shook. She wanted to scream, to hit back, to tell this woman exactly what she thought of people who wore $1,000 suits and $5 soles. But she didn't. She bent down, picked up the towel, and straightened. The boy Jasper, she'd learn later, was staring at her, tears streaming down his face. Nora met his eyes and signed, slow and deliberate, "You are not the problem. They are the ones who can't see." Jasper's tears stopped. For the first time since she'd entered the room, he smiled. Malcolm Ashford stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He looked at Nora, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. Confusion? Recognition? Pain. "Who are you?" His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. Before Nora could answer, Bernard appeared in the doorway, his face purple with rage. "Hartwell, my office, now." She didn't look back as she descended the stairs. Bernard's office was a closet with delusions of grandeur. He slammed the door and rounded on her. "What the hell were you thinking?" "She hit me. I don't care if she shot you. That woman is Vivian Cross, CEO of Cross Pharmaceuticals and Malcolm Ashford's business partner. You do not engage with her. You do not speak to her guests. You especially do not antagonize her in front of a man who's about to buy this building." Nora's chest tightened. "I didn't antagonize anyone. I was doing my job." "Your job is to be invisible." Bernard leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "You're fired. Clear out your locker and leave through the back." The words hit like a second slap. "You can't—" "I can, and I am. You're a liability, Hartwell. Always have been." She wanted to argue, to beg, to remind him that she'd worked here for 14 months without a single complaint. but the look on his face told her it wouldn't matter. She turned and left. Her locker held a spare shirt, a phone charger, and a photo of Evan. She took all three and walked out into the alley behind the restaurant. The October air bit through her thin uniform. She leaned against the brick wall and let herself cry just for a minute, because that was all the time she could afford. Her phone buzzed. Another text, this one from the towing company. "Your vehicle has been impounded. Retrieval fee, $380. Nora laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed off the buildings. $380. She had 42. She pulled her jacket tighter and started walking. The shelter on West Madison Street smelled like industrial cleaner and unwashed bodies. Nora checked in at the front desk, signed her name on a clipboard, and was assigned a cot in a room with 20 other women. The lights went out at 10. She lay awake staring at the water-stained ceiling and thought about Evan. He'd been 12 when the Hartwells adopted him, a skinny kid with a crooked smile and hands that never stopped moving. Deaf from birth, brilliant beyond measure. He'd taught Nora ASL in 3 months faster than any formal class could have. They'd been inseparable. When the leukemia came, Nora hadn't hesitated. She'd left school, left everything to make sure he didn't die alone. He died anyway, in a hospital room that cost $4,000 a day. Holding her hand and signing, "Thank you for loving me," she touched the locket at her throat. CEA. "Whoever you were," she thought, "I hope you'd be proud of the mess I've made." Sleep came in fragments. She woke at dawn to the sound of women shuffling toward the showers. Her back ached from the cot. Her phone was down to 11% battery. She had nowhere to go. At 8:30, the shelter coordinator called her name. There was a man at the front desk asking for her. Nora's first thought was Bernard coming to twist the knife. Her second thought was a bill collector. She walked to the lobby and stopped dead. Malcolm Ashford stood by the window, hands in the pockets of a charcoal overcoat. He looked out of place among the chipped linoleum and flickering fluorescents, like a statue dropped into a junkyard. When he saw her, his face went through a series of emotions too fast to name. "Miss Hartwell." He stepped forward, then stopped as if unsure whether to offer his hand. "I need to speak with you." "How did you find me?" I asked. He gestured toward the coordinator, who was suddenly very interested in her computer screen. "May we talk somewhere private?" Nora glanced around. Every woman in the lobby was staring. "There's a park across the street." They walked in silence. The park was little more than a patch of grass and a single bench, but it was better than the shelter. Malcolm sat first, moving stiffly like his joints hurt. Nora remained standing. "I owe you an apology," he began, "for last night. Vivian was out of line. She hit me, and you didn't say a word." "I know." His voice cracked. "I should have. He paused, searching for words. "I've made a great many mistakes, Miss Hartwell. That was one of them." Nora crossed her arms. "Why are you here?" Malcolm reached into his coat and pulled out a small object wrapped in tissue paper. He held it out to her. She didn't take it. "What is that?" "Open it, please." She unwrapped the tissue carefully. Inside was a locket, silver and tarnished, identical to the one around her neck. Her breath caught. Malcolm's hands trembled as he pointed to the engraving on the front. "CEA," he said. "Caroline Elise Ashford. My daughter." Nora stared at him. "I don't understand." "She was 6 months old when my son took her. Jonathan. Malcolm's voice broke. "He thought I didn't deserve her. He disappeared. I searched for 10 years. I bankrupted myself twice. I never stopped looking." "What does this have to do with me?" Malcolm met her eyes, and in them she saw something she recognized, grief that never healed. "You're wearing her locket, Miss Hartwell. The one I gave to my wife before she died. The one Caroline was wearing the night Jonathan took her." The world tilted. Nora sat down hard on the bench, her legs refusing to hold her. "That's impossible." "I had my investigator run your background. Nora Elise Hartwell. Born 1997, mother deceased, father unknown. Raised in Cook County orphanage until age 5. Adopted by the Hartwells, who lived at 3847 Hartwell Lane in Naperville. The same address Jonathan used on his last driver's license before he died in 2010. Nora's hands went numb. She looked down at the locket in her palm, then at the one around her neck. Identical. "You think I'm your daughter?" "I don't think." Malcolm's voice was barely a whisper. "I know. I had a DNA test run from a strand of hair you left at the restaurant. It came back this morning. 99.97% match." The bench felt like it was falling away beneath her. Nora stumbled back. "No, no, that's my parents were the Hartwells. My brother was Evan. I don't know you." "I know." Malcolm rose, his movement slow and deliberate, like approaching a spooked animal. "I know this is impossible to hear, but Jonathan was my son. He took you from me. And when he died, you ended up in the system because no one knew who you were. Why now?" Her voice came out sharp, defensive. "Why show up after 27 years? Because I didn't know you existed until yesterday. I saw you with Jasper, the way you signed to him. The phrase you used, 'You are not the problem. They are the ones who can't see.' My wife used to say that. To me, to Jonathan. I thought I'd never hear it again." Nora's chest was too tight. She couldn't breathe. I don't." Malcolm pulled a folder from his coat. "This is everything. Birth certificate, medical records, investigator's report. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to look." She took the folder with shaking hands. "There's one more thing." Malcolm's face was ashen. "Vivian Cross. She's my late wife's sister, Margaret's younger sister. She's been Jasper's guardian since his father died, and she's also the trustee of my estate." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because if you're Caroline and you are then under my will, you inherit 70% of my assets. Vivian inherits 10% as trustee and Jasper gets 20%. But if you're never found or if you're deemed unsuitable, then Vivian inherits 50% outright." The implication hit like a freight train. "You think she knew that I'm your daughter?" Malcolm's silence was answer enough. Nora looked down at the folder in her hands. Inside were answers she'd stopped hoping for a decade ago. A name, a history, a family, and a target on her back. She didn't go back to the shelter. Instead, she walked, miles and miles, until her feet blistered and the sun climbed toward noon. She ended up on the lakeshore, staring out at the water. The folder sat unopened in her lap. Her phone buzzed. 1% battery. The screen showed a single notification, a voicemail from an unknown number. She almost didn't listen. Then she did. The voice was female, clipped, professional. "Miss Hartwell, this is Officer Denise Ramirez with the Chicago Police Department. We need you to come to the station regarding an ongoing investigation. Please call this number at your earliest convenience." The line went dead. Nora's phone died 2 seconds later. She sat there for a long time, the folder heavy in her hands, the locket cold against her skin. Malcolm Ashford had given her a family. Vivian Cross, it seemed, was about to take it away. The police station on South State Street had the institutional warmth of a meat locker. Nora sat in a plastic chair bolted to the floor. The folder Malcolm had given her clutched against her chest like armor. Across from her, Officer Denise Ramirez typed something into a computer that looked older than Nora's Honda. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a monotonous drone that matched the pulse hammering in Nora's temples. Ramirez finally looked up, her expression neutral, in that way cops perfected early in their careers. "Miss Hartwell, are you familiar with the Illinois Medical Practice Act?" The question landed like a rock through glass. "I dropped out of nursing school. I never practiced." "That's not what we heard." Ramirez slid a photograph across the desk. It showed Nora kneeling beside Malcolm in the parking lot of the Crescent Room, her hands on his chest, performing CPR. The angle suggested it had been taken from above, possibly a security camera. "Witnesses say you administered emergency medical treatment without proper certification. That's a Class A misdemeanor. Up to a year in county and a $10,000 fine." Nora's throat went dry. "He was dying. I saved his life. And we appreciate that. But the law doesn't care about intent." Ramirez leaned back in her chair, the springs creaking. "Here's the thing, Miss Hartwell. The complaint didn't come from Mr. Ashford. It came from Vivian Cross, CEO of Cross Pharmaceuticals, member of the Illinois Medical Board, and apparently very concerned about unlicensed individuals practicing medicine in public spaces. The name hit like a fist. Vivian, of course. She's lying. She's trying to... To what? Ramirez's eyebrows lifted. Ruin your life. Why would a woman worth $500 million care about a waitress? Because I'm not just a waitress, Nora wanted to say. Because I'm the daughter she's been trying to erase for 27 years. But the words stuck in her throat, ridiculous and impossible, even though the DNA results in her folder said otherwise. Instead, she said nothing. Ramirez sighed and stood. Look, I'm not here to make your day worse, but you need a lawyer. This complaint has legs and Miss Cross has resources you don't. I'd take it seriously if I were you. Nora left the station with a court date, a case number, and a legal bill she couldn't begin to pay. She walked 7 blocks before her legs gave out. She sat on the curb outside a Walgreens, the folder heavy in her lap, and finally opened it. The first document was a birth certificate. Caroline Elise Ashford, born March 14, 1997. Mother, Margaret Eleanor Ashford. Father, Malcolm Theodore Ashford. The hospital was Northwestern Memorial. The attending physician's signature was illegible. The second document was a medical record. Patient Caroline E. Ashford, 3 months. Admitted for routine vaccination. Blood type O negative. Nora pulled up her sleeve and looked at the medical alert bracelet she'd worn since she was 15. O negative. The same. The third document was a missing person report filed in June 1997. Caroline Elise Ashford, 6 months old, abducted by Jonathan Michael Ashford, 24, biological son of Malcolm T. Ashford. Last seen Ashford residence, Lincoln Park, Chicago. The photograph attached showed a baby with dark hair and eyes the color of wet earth. Nora had seen that face before in mirrors in old photos the Hartwells kept in a shoebox. The fourth document was a death certificate. Jonathan Michael Ashford, died October 12, 2010. Cause motor vehicle accident. I-90 westbound adverse weather conditions. No passengers. No mention of a child. No mention of where Caroline had gone. The fifth document was an adoption record. Nora Elise Hartwell, age 5, adopted by Thomas and Helen Hartwell, June 2002. Previous residence, Cook County Children's Home. Birth parents unknown. The handwriting on the intake form noted child nonverbal possible trauma. Personal effects. 1 silver locket engraved CEA. Nora's hands trembled as she traced the letters. She'd asked Sister Catherine about the locket once when she was 8 or 9. The old nun had smiled sadly and said, "Your mother loved you very much. That's all you need to know." But it wasn't all. It was nothing. She closed the folder and looked up at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere in one of those glass towers, Vivian Cross was making calls, pulling strings, dismantling Nora's life piece by piece. And Malcolm, what was he doing? Regretting his confession, planning his next move. Her phone was dead. She had no charger. No money for one. She stood and started walking again, this time with a destination. Lincoln Park sprawled across 1,200 acres of green space on the city's north side. Nora had been there once with Evan years ago before the leukemia. They'd fed ducks at the pond and Evan had signed, "This is what rich people do when they're bored." She'd laughed and signed back, "Someday we'll be bored too." The Ashford estate sat on the southern edge of the park behind iron gates and a brick wall covered in ivy. Nora stood across the street staring at the house through the gaps in the wrought iron. It was old money-made stone, 3 stories of limestone and leaded glass with turrets that belonged in a fairy tale and a circular driveway that could fit 10 cars. Lights glowed in the downstairs windows. Someone was home. She crossed the street and pressed the buzzer on the gate. A camera swiveled toward her. A voice crackled through the speaker. Male, cautious, "Yes. I need to see Malcolm Ashford. Mr. Ashford is not receiving visitors. Tell him it's Nora Hartwell. Tell him I read the file." A pause. Then, one moment. The gate buzzed and swung open. Nora walked up the driveway, her footsteps echoing off the cobblestones. The front door opened before she reached it. A man in his 60s stood in the threshold, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a cardigan that looked like it cost more than her car had. He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Miss Hartwell, Mr. Ashford is in the study. Follow me." The interior of the house was exactly what she'd expected, and somehow worse: marble floors, oil paintings in gilt frames, a chandelier that could double as a weapon. The man, she assumed he was a butler or assistant, led her down a hallway lined with photographs. Malcolm shaking hands with mayors and senators, Malcolm cutting ribbons at building dedications, Malcolm standing beside a woman with kind eyes and dark hair, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. Nora stopped. The man in the cardigan paused and followed her gaze. "Mrs. Ashford. Margaret. She passed in childbirth." "I know." Nora's voice came out barely a whisper. "She was my mother." The man's expression shifted, something close to grief crossing his features. "Yes, I believe she was." The study was all dark wood and leather, the kind of room designed for cigars and brandy. Malcolm stood by the fireplace, staring into the flames. He turned when Nora entered, and the hope on his face was almost unbearable. "You came." "I shouldn't have." She set the folder on the desk between them. "This is insane. You can't just show up and rewrite someone's entire life." "I'm not rewriting it, I'm telling you the truth." "Your truth. What about mine?" Her voice rose, cracking. "I had parents. I had a brother. I had a life, and it wasn't this." She gestured at the room, the house, the absurdity of it all. Malcolm flinched. "I know, and I'm not asking you to forget them. But Nora Caroline, you deserve to know where you came from." "Don't call me that. My name is Nora." "Of course, I'm sorry." They stood in silence, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Nora spoke, her voice raw. "Vivian filed a complaint against me for practicing medicine without a license. The police called me in today." Malcolm's face went white. "What?" "She's trying to bury me, and you know why." "The will." Malcolm sank into the chair behind his desk, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. "I should have anticipated this. Vivian's always been calculating, but I didn't think she'd move this fast." "Why does she hate me?" "She doesn't even know me. She knows what you represent, a threat to her inheritance, a reminder that Margaret chose me over her family." Malcolm rubbed his temples. "Vivian never forgave me for her sister's death. She blamed me for getting Margaret pregnant at 32, said the pregnancy was too risky. When Margaret died, Vivian swore she'd make sure I never found happiness again. And taking your daughter was part of that. I don't know if she helped Jonathan or if she just didn't stop him. Either way, she let me believe Caroline was dead. She even held a memorial service." Nora felt sick. "You buried an empty casket. I buried a shoe. It was all we had." Malcolm's voice broke. "For 27 years I mourned a child who was alive. And Vivian knew. She had to know." The door to the study opened. The man in the cardigan entered carrying a tray with tea and something stronger. He set it on the desk and glanced at Malcolm with concern. "Sir, perhaps you should rest. Dr. Holloway said—" "I'm fine, Wade." Wade. The name clicked. Wade Mercer, the private investigator Malcolm had mentioned. Nora studied him again, noting the military posture, the watchful eyes. This wasn't just an assistant. This was someone Malcolm trusted. Wade nodded and left. Malcolm poured himself a drink, then offered one to Nora. She shook her head. "I can't stay here. Vivian will find out." "She already knows you're my daughter. The DNA test wasn't exactly covert." Malcolm took a sip, winced. "Which means she'll escalate. The medical complaint is just the beginning." "Then what do you want me to do?" "Fight back. Let me help you. I have resources, lawyers, investigators, money. Vivian may be powerful, but she's not untouchable." Nora wanted to say yes. Wanted to let this stranger with her dead mother's eyes and her own blood take care of everything. But trust was a luxury she'd learned to live without. "I need time." "Time is what we don't have." Malcolm stood and crossed to the window. Outside, the park stretched dark and endless. Vivian won't stop until you're discredited, imprisoned, or dead. And she'll use Jasper to do it. Jasper. He's 7 years old. He's also my heir. If you disappear, he inherits everything. And Vivian controls his trust until he's 25, which means she controls my fortune for the next 18 years. The pieces clicked into place, cold and precise. Vivian didn't just want Nora gone. She wanted Nora erased, her existence scrubbed from the record so completely that Malcolm's will would revert to the original terms. No daughter, no complication, just a grieving old man and the sister-in-law who'd waited decades for her payday. Nora's phone was still dead, but she didn't need it to know what came next. The lawsuit, the arrest, the trial. Vivian had money, connections, and time. Nora had none of those things, but she had one advantage Vivian didn't expect: she had nothing left to lose. All right. The words came out steady, stronger than she felt. I'll fight, but on my terms. Malcolm turned, relief flooding his face. Anything. Name it. First, I want Wade to dig into Vivian's finances. If she's been embezzling from Jasper's trust, I want proof. Done. Second, I want access to Jasper. If she's using him as leverage, I need to know he's safe. Malcolm hesitated. Vivian has full custody. I'm only allowed supervised visits. Then supervise. Invite me as your guest. She can't stop you from having company. She'll see through it. Let her. Nora met his eyes. I'm not hiding anymore. The call came 3 days later. Wade's voice was tight, controlled. We have a problem. Nora was at the Lincoln Deaf Community Center teaching ASL to a group of teenagers. She stepped into the hallway, her stomach already sinking. What kind of problem? Vivian's moving faster than we thought. She's filed a petition with the court to have you declared mentally unfit. The words didn't make sense. On what grounds? Delusional disorder. She's claiming you've convinced yourself you're Malcolm's daughter despite all evidence to the contrary. She's got 3 affidavits from medical professionals who've never met you. Nora's grip on the phone tightened. That's insane. It's also effective. If the court grants a psychiatric evaluation and the evaluator rules against you, you'll be barred from contesting the will. You'll also lose any claim to visitation with Jasper. Can she do that? She's Vivian Cross. She can do anything. Wade paused. There's more. We found irregularities in Jasper's trust. $3.2 million withdrawn over the past 4 years, all signed off by Vivian as trustee. The money went to a shell company in Delaware. Can we trace it? We're trying, but it's buried under enough layers that it'll take weeks to unravel. Weeks we don't have. Nora leaned against the wall, her mind racing. A psychiatric evaluation. Financial fraud. Vivian was playing chess while Nora barely understood checkers. What does Malcolm say? He wants to confront her. I told him that's a terrible idea. Why? Because Vivian doesn't respond to confrontation. She responds to exposure. We need leverage, something public enough that she can't sweep it under the rug. Nora thought of the teenagers in the classroom behind her, laughing and signing with hands that spoke a language most people would never bother to learn. She thought of Evan, who'd spent 19 years navigating a world that saw his deafness as a deficit instead of a difference. She thought of Jasper, trapped in a house with a woman who saw him as a pawn. I have an idea. The words came out before she'd fully formed the plan. But it's risky. How risky? The kind that ends with me in jail or Vivian in ruins. No middle ground. Wade was silent for a long moment. Then, I'm listening. The gala was Vivian's idea, or so the invitation claimed. An evening for deaf education hosted by Cross Pharmaceuticals and the Ashford Foundation, with proceeds benefiting schools across Illinois. Black tie, $500 a plate, guest list limited to Chicago's elite. Nora received her invitation via courier, a cream-colored envelope with her name written in calligraphy. Inside a handwritten note, I know what you're planning. Come if you dare. VC. Malcolm wanted to cancel. Wade wanted to triple security. Nora wanted to walk into that ballroom and burn it down. She wore a dress Wade had procured from somewhere midnight blue, simple but elegant. The kind of thing that didn't scream, "I'm secretly an heiress." Her hair was pinned up the locket hidden beneath the high neckline. She looked like someone who belonged at a gala, which felt like the biggest con she'd ever pulled. The venue was the Palmer House Hilton, a Chicago landmark dripping with gold leaf and crystal. Nora arrived alone, her invitation checked by a woman with a clipboard and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. The ballroom was already packed, men in tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than Nora's annual salary. A string quartet played near the stage. Waiters circulated with champagne. Nora took a glass and moved along the perimeter scanning for Vivian. She found her near the bar holding court with a circle of admirers. Vivian wore red, a calculated choice that made her look like a matador ready for the kill. When she saw Nora, her smile widened. "Miss Hartwell, how brave of you to attend." The circle turned to stare. Nora felt their eyes like laser sights. "I wouldn't miss it. Deaf education is close to my heart." "Of course it is." Vivian's tone dripped condescension. "I hear you volunteer at a community center. How noble. Though I wonder if they know about your legal troubles. I wonder if your donors know about the $3 million you stole from your nephew's trust." The circle went silent. Vivian's smile didn't falter, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Careful, dear. Slander is actionable. So is embezzlement." Vivian stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss only Nora could hear. "You have no idea what you're playing with. Walk away now and I'll make your court case disappear. Stay, and I'll destroy you." Nora didn't blink. "You already tried. I'm still here." Before Vivian could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Malcolm had arrived, Jasper at his side. The boy wore a miniature tuxedo and looked utterly miserable, his hands twisting together in a nervous gesture Nora recognized from the restaurant. Malcolm's gaze swept the room, landing on Nora. Relief crossed his face. Vivian's expression turned glacial. "Excuse me, I need to handle something." She glided toward Malcolm, intercepting him before he reached Nora. The conversation was too far away to hear, but the body language was clear. Vivian pointing toward the exit, Malcolm shaking his head, Jasper shrinking into himself. Nora moved closer, weaving through the crowd. As she approached, Jasper's head turned. He saw her and his face lit up. He signed fast and excited. Rabbit Lady Nora smiled and signed back. "Hello, T-Rex." Vivian's head snapped toward her. "What did you just say to him?" "I said hello." "You were making hand gestures. Stop confusing him." "I wasn't confusing him. I was communicating." Nora crouched to Jasper's level, ignoring Vivian's protest. "Are you okay?" Jasper nodded, but his hands told a different story. "She's mean. I don't like her." Malcolm's voice cut through the tension. "Vivian, that's enough. Nora is my guest." "Your guest?" Vivian's laugh was sharp. "Malcolm, she's a con artist. She's using that boy to manipulate you." "The DNA test says otherwise." The words landed like a grenade. Nearby conversations stopped. Heads turned. Vivian's face went white, then red. "You had no right. I had every right. She's my daughter." The ballroom erupted into whispers. Vivian grabbed Malcolm's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "We're leaving. Now." "No." Malcolm pulled free. "I'm done letting you control my life." Vivian's mask cracked. For the first time, Nora saw real fury beneath the polish. "You'll regret this." She turned and walked toward the stage, heels clicking like gunshots. The MC, a nervous man in a bow tie, handed her the microphone. Vivian's voice filled the ballroom, amplified and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. Before we begin the auction, I have an announcement regarding the Ashford Foundation." Nora's stomach dropped. Malcolm tensed beside her. Vivian smiled, all teeth and venom. As some of you may have heard, Malcolm Ashford recently encountered a young woman claiming to be his long-lost daughter. A touching story, if it were true. Unfortunately, evidence suggests otherwise. She gestured and a screen descended behind her. A video began to play Nora at the police station looking disheveled and desperate. Nora outside the shelter sitting on the curb. Nora at the community center teaching ASL. Vivian's narration continued. Miss Nora Hartwell has a history of financial instability and mental health struggles. She dropped out of nursing school and has been living in her car for the past month. She recently filed a fraudulent claim against Mr. Ashford's estate using a stolen locket and fabricated DNA evidence. The whispers turned to murmurs. Nora's face burned. Malcolm stepped forward. "That's a lie." The video changed. Now it showed Nora kneeling beside Malcolm in the parking lot performing CPR. The timestamp read 2 weeks ago. Vivian's voice was silk over steel. Miss Hartwell also practiced medicine without a license, a crime for which she is currently under investigation. This is the woman Malcolm Ashford wants you to believe is his heir. The ballroom was silent except for the video's audio. Nora's voice, breathless and scared, saying, "Stay with me, stay with me." Then the screen went black. Vivian lowered the microphone, her smile triumphant. "I think we all know the truth." Nora's hands clenched into fists. Rage and shame warred in her chest. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to grab that microphone and tell these people exactly what Vivian was. But the faces staring at her were already closed, already convinced. Malcolm's voice was hoarse. "Nora, I'm so sorry. Don't." She turned and walked toward the exit, head high, even though her legs trembled. Behind her, Vivian's voice rang out one last time. "Security, please escort Miss Hartwell from the premises. She's trespassing." 2 guards materialized on either side of her. Nora didn't resist as they led her out through the ballroom and into the lobby. The last thing she heard before the doors closed was applause. She made it as far as the street before the tears came. She leaned against the side of the building, her breath coming in gasps, and let herself break. Just for a minute, just long enough to remember that she was still human. When she looked up, Wade was standing there. "How bad?" Her voice cracked. "Bad, but not fatal." He handed her a phone. "Malcolm wants to talk to you." She took the phone, her hands shaking. Malcolm's voice was ragged. "Nora, listen to me. We're not done. Vivian thinks she won, but she just made a mistake." "What mistake?" "She aired that video in front of 500 witnesses, which means when we prove she lied, it'll be 500 witnesses to her perjury." "How do we prove it?" "Wade found something, a recording. Vivian talking to her lawyer about planting the Ambien in your bag at the shelter." Nora's heart stopped. "She framed me. She framed you. And we have her on tape." For the first time in hours, Nora felt something other than despair. She felt fury, clean and bright and unstoppable. "When do we release it?" Malcolm's voice was grim. "Not yet. First, we need Jasper safe. Vivian's not going to go down without a fight, and she'll use him as a shield." Nora looked back at the hotel, at the golden light spilling from the ballroom windows. Somewhere in there, a 7-year-old boy was trapped with a woman who saw him as collateral. "Then we get him out. Tonight." Wade's expression hardened. "That's kidnapping." "Not if Malcolm has custody." "He doesn't. Vivian does." "Then we change that." Nora met Wade's eyes, her resolve crystallizing into something sharp and unbreakable. "How fast can you file an emergency custody petition?" Wade checked his watch. "Judge Morrison owes Malcolm a favor. I can have it filed within the hour." "Do it. And Wade," Nora's voice was ice, "make sure Vivian doesn't see it coming." Judge Morrison's chambers smelled like old books and stale coffee. The walls were lined with legal volumes no one had touched in decades, their spines cracked and faded. Nora sat in a leather chair that had seen better years, Wade beside her, Malcolm across the room, pacing like a caged animal. The clock on the wall read 11:47 at night. They'd been waiting for 23 minutes. The door opened. Judge Morrison entered, a woman in her 60s with iron-gray hair and bifocals that magnified eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She carried a file folder and didn't sit. "Mr. Ashford, you're asking me to overturn a custody arrangement that's been in place for 3 years. On what grounds?" Malcolm stopped pacing. "Neglect, emotional abuse, financial exploitation." "Do you have evidence?" Wade stood and handed her a second folder thicker than the first. "Bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals from the miners' trust. medical records indicating the child has been overmedicated with sedatives, and an audio recording of Miss Cross discussing how to eliminate a perceived threat to her inheritance. Judge Morrison opened the folder and read in silence. Her expression didn't change, but her knuckles went white where she gripped the pages. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up. "This is serious. If even half of this is accurate, Miss Cross should be in custody herself." "Then grant the petition." Malcolm's voice was rough, desperate. "Give me temporary custody until a full hearing can be scheduled. Jasper isn't safe with her." The judge set down the folder and removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Mr. Ashford, I've known you for 20 years. You're a good man. But this," she gestured at the file, "this is a powder keg. If I grant this petition and you're wrong, it'll destroy you. If I grant it and you're right, it'll destroy Vivian Cross. Either way, someone's life ends tonight. Better hers than my grandson's." Judge Morrison studied him for a long moment. Then she picked up a pen and signed the emergency order. "You have 72 hours. After that, we go to court and let the evidence speak. Don't make me regret this, Malcolm." "You won't." They left the courthouse at 12:15. The city was quieter at this hour, the streets emptied of everyone except the desperate and the dangerous. Nora sat in the back of Wade's car, the custody order folded in her pocket, and tried not to think about what came next. Malcolm turned to face her from the front seat. "Vivian's going to retaliate. The moment we take Jasper, she'll file countercharges. Kidnapping, contempt of court, anything she can think of. Let her." Nora's voice was steadier than she felt. "We have the recording. We have the bank records. She can file whatever she wants. She can also vanish, take Jasper and disappear before we execute the order." Wade glanced in the rearview mirror. "She won't run. Running means admitting guilt. Vivian's too arrogant for that. Then we move fast." Malcolm pulled out his phone. "I'll call the estate. Have security ready to receive Jasper. Nora, you'll need to stay there too, if Vivian tries anything. I'm not hiding. You're not equipped to handle what she'll throw at you." "Neither are you." Nora leaned forward, her hand on the back of Malcolm's seat. "I've spent 27 years surviving on my own. I can handle one vindictive billionaire." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "She's more than vindictive. She's calculated. And she's already proven she'll do anything to protect what she thinks is hers." "Good." Nora met his eyes in the mirror. "So will I." They arrived at Vivian's brownstone in Lincoln Park at 1:17 in the morning. The house was dark except for a single light on the second floor. Wade parked across the street and killed the engine. For a moment no one moved. Malcolm broke the silence first. "I should go alone." "No." Nora opened her door. "She'll try to manipulate you. She's been doing it for 30 years. "And what makes you think she won't manipulate you?" "Because I have nothing she can take." Nora stepped onto the sidewalk, her breath visible in the October cold. "You coming or not?" Malcolm followed. Wade stayed in the car engine, idling, ready to move if things went sideways. The front door was solid oak with a brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. Malcolm raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. Nora reached past him and slammed the knocker 3 times, the sound echoing down the empty street. Nothing happened. She knocked again, harder. A light flickered on in the foyer. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. The door opened 6 inches, held by a security chain. Vivian stood in the gap, wrapped in a silk robe, her face carefully composed despite the late hour. "Malcolm, how unexpected. We need to talk." "At 1 in the morning, I think not." Her gaze shifted to Nora. "And you brought your little project. How touching." Nora held up the custody order. "We're here for Jasper." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me. Emergency custody, signed by Judge Morrison 30 minutes ago. You have 5 minutes to produce Jasper or we call the police." For the first time since Nora had met her, Vivian looked genuinely surprised. Then the surprise hardened into something colder. "You can't be serious." Malcolm's voice was granite. "Let us in, Vivian." She stared at him for a long moment, then unhooked the chain. The door swung open. Vivian stepped back, her posture rigid, every inch the wronged party. "This is a mistake, Malcolm. Whatever lies she's told you." I've heard the recording. His words cut like a blade. The one where you discuss planting evidence in Nora's bag. The one where you laugh about how easy it is to destroy someone's life. Vivian's face went pale. That's fabricated. It's time-stamped and authenticated. Wade already sent it to the DA's office. The color drained completely from Vivian's cheeks. She swayed slightly, catching herself on the doorframe. You have no idea what you've done. I've protected my grandson. Where is he? Upstairs, sleeping. Vivian's voice was brittle now, the polish cracking. You're really going to wake a child in the middle of the night and drag him from his home? This isn't his home, it's yours, and you've been using him as a piggy bank for 4 years. Vivian flinched. For a moment, Nora almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I want my lawyer present before you take him. Malcolm pulled out his phone and showed her the custody order. You have no legal standing to prevent this. Step aside or I'll have Wade call the police to enforce the order. Vivian looked at Nora, her eyes blazing with hatred so pure it was almost physical. You did this. You wormed your way into his life with your sob stories and your dead brother. You manipulated him. I saved his life. Nora's voice was quiet, lethal. Which is more than you've ever done for anyone. Vivian lunged. It wasn't a slap this time. It was a full-body tackle nails aimed at Nora's face. Malcolm caught her arm mid-swing, yanking her back with enough force to send her stumbling. She hit the wall, hard breath whooshing out. Enough. Malcolm's voice shook. Get Jasper. Now. Vivian straightened slowly, smoothing her robe with trembling hands. This isn't over. You're right. It's not. Malcolm held up his phone again, this time showing a text from Wade. The FBI is opening an investigation into your finances. By tomorrow morning, every bank account you control will be frozen. Every asset scrutinized. Every lie exposed. Vivian's laugh was broken glass. You think you can destroy me? I'm Margaret's sister. I'm family. Family doesn't steal from children. Malcolm's face was stone. Family doesn't frame innocent women. Family doesn't poison the people they claim to love. The word poison landed like a bomb. Vivian's eyes widened just for a second before she caught herself. Nora saw it. What did you do? Nothing. I don't know what he's talking about. Malcolm turned to Nora, his expression grim. Wade found Ambien in Jasper's system. High enough levels to sedate a grown man, let alone a 7-year-old. We had his blood tested after the gala. Nora's stomach turned. You drugged him. He was agitated. I gave him something to help him sleep. You gave him enough to stop his breathing. Malcolm's voice cracked. The doctor said another dose and we'd be planning a funeral. Vivian's mask shattered. She sank to the floor, her back against the wall, and for the first time looked small, fragile, human. I didn't mean to. I just wanted him quiet. He's always so loud in his silence, always demanding attention with those hands. She broke off, pressing her palms to her face. I'm not like Margaret. I don't have her patience. I don't have her love. Nora crouched down, meeting Vivian's eyes. Then why did you take him? Because Malcolm needed to suffer. The words came out flat, matter-of-fact. He killed my sister. Got her pregnant when she was too old, too fragile. I told him it was dangerous. I begged him to consider adoption. But he wanted a legacy, and Margaret wanted to make him happy. So she died giving him one. Malcolm's voice was barely a whisper. I loved her. Love isn't enough. Vivian looked up at him, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. It never is. You loved her and she died. You loved Caroline and Jonathan took her. You loved your fortune and I took that too, piece by piece, because you didn't deserve any of it. The confession hung in the air, damning and complete. Nora stood slowly, every muscle in her body coiled tight. Where's Jasper? Vivian gestured weakly toward the stairs. Second door on the left. But you won't get far. I have lawyers on retainer who'll tie this up in court for years. I have friends in every level of government. I have nothing. Nora turned her back on the woman and climbed the stairs. You have nothing that matters. Jasper's room was painted sky blue with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. The bed was too large for such a small child, and he looked even smaller curled beneath the blankets, his dark hair spread across the pillow. Nora approached carefully, sitting on the edge of the mattress. She touched his shoulder, gentle but firm. His eyes opened. For a moment confusion clouded his face. Then recognition dawned and he sat up fast, signing, "You came back. I came back." Nora signed, her hands steady despite the tears threatening to spill. "We're leaving. You and me and your grandfather." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe." "Is she coming?" Jasper's hands trembled as he signed Vivian's name. "No, she's not." Relief flooded his face. He threw his arms around Nora's neck and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. She lifted him easily. He weighed nothing, all bones and bird-hollow fragility. Malcolm appeared in the doorway, his eyes red-rimmed. "Is he okay?" Nora nodded. Jasper saw his grandfather and reached out one hand, fingers spread in the sign for family. Malcolm crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled them both into an embrace that felt like the first real thing that had happened in weeks. Downstairs, Vivian was gone. The front door stood open, cold October wind whistling through the foyer. Wade was in the driveway, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapidly. He looked up as they emerged. "Police are on their way." Vivian made a run for it. Malcolm's jaw tightened. "Which way?" "North, toward the park. She won't get far." "Let her go." Nora shifted Jasper's weight in her arms. The boy had buried his face in her shoulder, his small body shaking. "We have what we came for." Wade hesitated, then nodded. They loaded into the car, Malcolm driving now, Wade in the passenger seat, running point on logistics, Nora in the back with Jasper curled against her side. The city blurred past the window, streetlights painting everything in sodium vapor orange. Jasper's hands moved against Nora's arm, slow and uncertain. "Is she going to jail?" "I don't know." Nora signed back. "But you're safe now. That's what matters." "Will you stay?" The question hit harder than it should have. Nora looked at Malcolm in the rearview mirror. His eyes met hers, hopeful and desperate and terrified of the answer. "Yes." She signed the motion, deliberate and sure. "I'll stay as long as you need me." Jasper's grip tightened. Within minutes his breathing evened out into sleep. Nora leaned her head against the window and watched Chicago slide past this city that had taken everything from her and somehow given it all back in the form of a man she barely knew and a child who spoke her brother's language. The Ashford estate was lit up like a fortress. Security guards flanked the gate, the driveway, the front door. Inside, the staff had prepared rooms, one for Jasper, one for Nora, both on the second floor near Malcolm's suite. A doctor waited in the study, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and efficient hands. She examined Jasper while he slept, taking blood samples and checking vitals, her face growing grimmer with each measurement. When she emerged, Malcolm was waiting in the hallway. "How bad?" "He'll recover, but the ambient levels were dangerously high. Another dose and we'd be having a very different conversation." The doctor packed her equipment with sharp, angry movements. "Who did this to him?" "Someone who won't be around him ever again." The doctor nodded, satisfied. "Keep him hydrated. Let him sleep as much as he needs. And for God's sake, get him into therapy. That child has been through hell." She left. Malcolm stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the closed door to Jasper's room. Nora emerged from her own room, having changed out of the gala dress into jeans and a sweater Wade had somehow procured. "You should rest." Malcolm's voice was hoarse. "It's almost 3. So should you." "I can't. Every time I close my eyes I see her face. Vivian, Margaret, Caroline." He broke off, shaking his head. "I don't even know what to call you." "Nora, that's who I am. But you're also my daughter." "Biologically. DNA doesn't erase 27 years of being someone else." She leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know how to be your daughter, Malcolm. I barely know how to be myself right now." "Then don't be my daughter. Be Nora. That's enough." The simplicity of it made something in her chest crack open. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Malcolm cleared his throat. "There's something you should see. In the study." She followed him downstairs. The study was exactly as she remembered, dark wood leather chairs, fire burning low in the grate. But now there was a box on the desk, wooden and worn with tarnished brass hinges. Malcolm opened it carefully. Inside were letters, dozens of them yellowed with age, tied with ribbon. Malcolm picked up the top bundle and handed it to Nora. Margaret wrote these while she was pregnant. One letter for every week. She wanted Caroline to have them when she was old enough to understand. Nora's hands trembled as she untied the ribbon. The first letter was dated January 1997, written in careful script on cream-colored paper. My darling Caroline, today we learned you're a girl. Your father cried. He won't admit it, but I saw the tears. He's terrified of being a father again, terrified of failing you the way he thinks he failed Jonathan. But I know something he doesn't fear means you care, and your father cares more than any man I've ever known. I'm writing this because I want you to know where you came from, not just the biology anyone can make a baby. I want you to know the love that made you possible. Your father and I met when I was 20 working as an ASL interpreter at a business conference. He was 44, recently divorced, convinced he'd never find happiness again. I interpreted for a deaf entrepreneur, and afterward your father asked me to dinner. I said no. He asked again. I said no again. He asked 7 more times before I said yes. We were married within a year. His family thought I was a gold digger. My family thought he was too old. We didn't care. Love doesn't ask permission. If you're reading this, I'm not there to tell you myself. That means something went wrong. But I need you to know you were wanted. You were loved. And whatever happens, you are enough. All my heart. Your mother. Nora's vision blurred. She set the letter down carefully, her hands shaking. Malcolm stood by the fire, his back to her shoulders, rigid with the effort of not breaking. She knew. Nora's voice cracked. She knew she might not survive. The doctors warned her. High-risk pregnancy at 32, history of complications. But she wanted you anyway. She said some risks are worth taking. And Vivian blamed you for that choice. Every day since. Malcolm turned, his face ravaged. But I'd do it again, even knowing what I'd lose. Because I got you, even if it took 27 years to find you. The words hung between them, too big and too true to fit into the careful distance they'd been maintaining. Nora stood and crossed to him, her arms wrapping around his waist before she could talk herself out of it. Malcolm froze, then slowly, carefully hugged her back. They stood like that for a long time, two people who'd lost everything, learning how to hold on. Dawn came gray and cold. Nora woke to find Jasper standing beside her bed, his small face serious. She sat up, signing, "What's wrong?" "Bad dream. Want to talk about it?" He climbed onto the bed and curled against her, his body still trembling. His hands moved slowly. She was hurting Grandpa. I tried to stop her, but I couldn't make sounds. No one could hear me. Nora's throat tightened. You don't need sounds to be heard. You have your hands. You have your heart. That's louder than any voice. Really, really. She signed the word with emphasis, making sure he saw the certainty in her movements. Jasper considered this, his brow furrowed. Then, are you my mom now? The question landed like a physical blow. Nora's hands stilled. She thought of Margaret writing letters to a daughter she'd never raise. She thought of the Hartwells who'd loved her despite having no obligation to. She thought of Evan, who'd called her sister in a language most people would never learn. I'm your friend, she signed carefully. Your family. Whatever you need me to be. Jasper's face scrunched up, processing. Then he nodded and signed, Okay. But can you teach me more signs Vivian never wanted to learn? I'll teach you everything I know. They went downstairs together. The kitchen was empty. The staff not yet arrived for the day. Nora made scrambled eggs while Jasper sat at the island, his feet dangling off the stool, watching her hands as she explained each ingredient in ASL. By the time Malcolm appeared, showered and dressed, but looking like he'd aged a decade overnight, they'd created an entire vocabulary around breakfast. Malcolm signed good morning with the careful precision of someone still learning. Jasper beamed and signed back, correcting his grandfather's hand position. It was the most normal moment Nora had experienced in weeks. Then Wade arrived with news that shattered the peace. Vivian's been arrested. Malcolm set down his coffee. Where? O'Hare. She tried to board a flight to Geneva using a fake passport. TSA flagged her, FBI took her into custody. Wade pulled out his phone, showing them a news article. The headline read, "Pharmaceutical CEO arrested on multiple charges." Nora scanned the details. Embezzlement, child endangerment, fraud, obstruction of justice, and new charges she hadn't anticipated: clinical trial fraud from her pharmaceutical company, kickbacks to doctors, falsified safety data on medications that had harmed patients. How long until trial? Arraignment scheduled for 2 this afternoon. Wade's expression was grim. DA's office wants to move fast. With the flight risk and severity of charges, they're asking for no bail. Malcolm's hands clenched around his coffee mug. I should be there. Malcolm, Nora started. She was Margaret's sister, family. I owe it to my wife's memory to witness this. You don't owe Vivian anything. Not Vivian, Margaret. Malcolm's voice was rough. She'd want me to see this through, to know that justice was served even if it destroys what's left of her family. Wade nodded. I'll arrange security. Courthouse will be a media circus. Nora looked at Jasper, who'd gone very still, his eyes wide. She signed, Do you want to come, or stay here where it's safe? Jasper's hands moved without hesitation. I want to see her go away. So I know it's real. The courthouse steps were packed with reporters and protesters. News vans lined the street, satellite dishes reaching toward the gray October sky. Someone had organized a demonstration, patients harmed by Cross Pharmaceuticals' fraudulent drugs, holding signs with photos of loved ones who'd suffered. The crowd's anger was palpable, a living thing that pressed against the police barriers. Wade led them through a side entrance away from the cameras. Inside, the hallways smelled like floor wax and fear. They were directed to a courtroom on the 3rd floor, smaller than Nora had expected. The gallery was already filling with reporters, lawyers, victims' families. Vivian sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back severely, no makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes. When she saw Malcolm enter with Nora and Jasper, something flickered across her face. Regret, maybe, or just exhaustion. She looked away quickly. The bailiff called for order. Judge Morrison entered, her expression carved from stone. The People versus Vivian Rose Cross. 23 counts, including embezzlement, child endangerment, fraud, and obstruction of justice. She paused, her gaze finding Vivian. How does the defendant plead? Vivian's attorney, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit, stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. We maintain my client's innocence and request reasonable bail. Denied. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the courtroom. Miss Cross attempted to flee the country using fraudulent documents. She poses an extreme flight risk. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. The courtroom erupted. Vivian's attorney objected loudly. The prosecutor looked satisfied. Jasper squeezed Nora's hand so tightly her fingers went numb. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like thunder. Order! I will have order in this court. The noise subsided. The judge leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Vivian. Miss Cross, you are accused of heinous crimes against a child in your care. You are accused of defrauding patients who trusted your company with their lives. You are accused of corrupting the medical system for personal profit. If these allegations are proven true, you will spend the rest of your life in prison. Do you understand the severity of your situation? Vivian stood slowly, her orange jumpsuit hanging loose on her diminished frame. I understand, Your Honor. Good. Trial is set for January 15th. Prosecution, have your evidence ready. Defense, prepare your client for the fight of her life. The gavel fell. We're adjourned. Guards moved toward Vivian. As they reached for her arms, she turned one last time toward the gallery. Her eyes found Malcolm's. I'm sorry. The words were barely audible over the courtroom noise. Not for getting caught, for becoming the monster Margaret would have hated. Then she was gone, led through a side door toward the holding cells. The courtroom slowly emptied. Malcolm sat frozen, his face ashen. Nora touched his shoulder. Let's go home. He nodded, but didn't move. Jasper climbed into his lap, small arms wrapping around his grandfather's neck. The gesture seemed to break whatever paralysis had gripped Malcolm. He stood carefully holding the boy close and followed Nora out into the hallway. The weeks that followed were a blur of lawyers and depositions and evidence review. Wade's team uncovered more fraud, dozens of patients harmed by cross-pharmaceuticals, falsified drug trials, millions in kickbacks to doctors who prescribed medications they knew were dangerous. The case against Vivian expanded from 23 counts to 47. Malcolm threw himself into damage control, using his resources to set up a victim compensation fund. $5 million immediately, with promises of more as the full scope of Vivian's crimes became clear. It wouldn't undo the harm, but it was something. Nora focused on Jasper. Therapy 3 times a week with a specialist in childhood trauma. ASL lessons every morning, turning the study into a classroom. Building routines, creating safety, teaching him that the world could be predictable and kind. She also started working with Malcolm's foundation, drafting plans for deaf education programs across Illinois. What began as a single proposal evolved into something bigger, a network of schools, a scholarship program, teacher training. The Evan Hartwell Initiative, they called it, a legacy for her brother built from grief and determination. And she read Margaret's letters, one per night, saving them like precious rations. Each one revealed more about the mother she'd never known, her sense of humor, her love of old movies, her terror that Malcolm would never recover if something happened to her. The final letter was dated March 13, 1997, the day before Nora was born. My darling Caroline, tomorrow I'll meet you. The doctors say it's too dangerous that I should have a C-section today, but I'm waiting. March 14th. That's the day your father and I met 7 years ago. It feels right that you should arrive on our anniversary. I'm not afraid of dying. That probably sounds strange, but it's true. I've lived a full life. I've loved deeply. I've done work that mattered. If tomorrow is my last day, I'll have no regrets except one, not getting to see who you become. But I have faith. Faith that your father will love you enough for both of us. Faith that you'll grow up strong and kind and unbreakable. Faith that even if I'm not there, you'll know you were wanted. So here's what I need you to remember, my darling girl. You are not an accident. You are not a tragedy. You are the best choice I ever made. And whatever the world tells you, you are enough exactly as you are. Love doesn't ask permission. It doesn't play it safe. It risks everything, because some things, some people are worth the fall. You are worth the fall. All my love, forever. Your mother. Nora read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she folded it carefully and placed it back in the box with the others. She found Malcolm in the study, staring into the fire. She knew. Nora's voice was steady despite the tears. She knew she was dying, and she chose me anyway. Malcolm looked up, his own eyes wet. She chose us, both of us, even knowing what it would cost. I wish I'd known her. You do know her. You're just like her, stubborn, compassionate, willing to risk everything for the people you love. Malcolm stood and crossed to the desk, pulling out a small frame. This was her favorite photo. The picture showed Margaret at 25, signing to a classroom of deaf children, her face alight with joy. Nora traced the image with one finger, seeing her own features reflected back, the shape of the eyes, the curve of the smile. I want to be like her. The words came out fierce, determined. Not just genetically. I want to make the kind of difference she made. You already are. Malcolm set the frame on the mantel beside photos of Jasper and the Ashford family. The school proposal you drafted, the board approved full funding. 12 campuses opening next fall. 3,000 students in the first year alone. Nora's breath caught. 12 schools. 12 to start. Will expand based on demand. Your co-director, along with Dr. Patricia Wong from Gallaudet. Congratulations. The title felt too big, too important. Co-director of a multi-million-dollar education initiative. 6 weeks ago, she'd been sleeping in her car. The transformation was almost impossible to process. I don't know how to do this. Neither did I when I started my first company. You learn as you go. You hire smart people. You admit when you're wrong. And you never forget why you started. Malcolm's hand was warm on her shoulder. You're doing this for Evan, for Jasper, for every kid who's been told they're broken when they're just different. That's all the qualification you need. January 15th arrived with bitter cold and a sky the color of old steel. The trial had been moved to a larger courthouse to accommodate the media attention. Vivian's case had become a lightning rod: pharmaceutical fraud, child abuse, corporate greed. The protesters had grown from a handful to hundreds, their chants audible even inside the building. Nora sat in the gallery with Malcolm and Jasper Wade on the aisle seat running security. The trial was expected to last 6 weeks. The prosecution had 73 witnesses, thousands of pages of evidence, recordings, and documents that painted Vivian as a calculating criminal who'd spent years building her empire on lies. The defense had very little. Opening statements took 2 hours. The prosecutor was a woman in her 50s named Rachel Kowalski, and she was surgical in her precision. She laid out the timeline: Vivian learning about Nora's existence, the planted evidence, the drugging of Jasper, the embezzlement, the pharmaceutical fraud. Each crime built on the last, creating a portrait of systematic corruption. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a woman who had everything: wealth, position, respect, and it wasn't enough. She wanted more, and she was willing to destroy anyone who stood in her way, including a 7-year-old child. Kowalski pointed at Vivian. The evidence will show that Vivian Cross is not just guilty of these crimes. She is a danger to society, and she must be held accountable. The defense attorney, a man named Harrison Blake, tried to paint Vivian as a grieving sister driven to temporary madness by the return of Caroline. My client made mistakes, yes, but they came from a place of pain, not malice. She loved her sister. She loved that little boy. And when she thought Malcolm Ashford was being deceived by a con artist, she reacted poorly. That's not criminal intent. That's human error. The argument fell flat. The jury looked skeptical. The trial proceeded with methodical efficiency. Witnesses testified about the embezzlement: bank records, forged signatures, shell companies. Medical experts explained the danger of the Ambien doses found in Jasper's blood. Patients from Cross Pharmaceuticals told heartbreaking stories of medications that made them sicker, clinical trials that ignored warning signs, doctors who prescribed drugs they knew were harmful because Vivian's company paid them to. Wade testified about the investigation. Malcolm testified about discovering Nora's identity. The restaurant manager, Bernard Klein, was called to explain how Vivian had paid him to fire Nora and spread rumors about her instability. On day 12, Nora took the stand. The prosecutor's questions were straightforward. Miss Hartwell, please tell the jury about your first encounter with Miss Cross. Nora described the restaurant, the slap, Jasper's isolation. She described Vivian's campaign to destroy her credibility, the planted evidence, the public humiliation at the gala. And when you learned you were Malcolm Ashford's daughter, how did Miss Cross react? She tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. She filed false police reports. She drugged Jasper and framed me for child abuse. Nora's voice was steady, her gaze never leaving the jury. She told me once that she'd destroy me. She meant it. The defense attorney's cross-examination was aggressive. Miss Hartwell, isn't it true that you approached Mr. Ashford looking for money? No. I was working as a waitress. He found me. After you conveniently performed CPR on him in a parking lot. Very heroic. Very calculated. He was dying. I saved his life. There was nothing calculated about it. And the DNA test that supposedly proves you're his daughter. Did you have any involvement in that process? No. Malcolm had it done without my knowledge. How convenient that you just happened to be wearing a locket identical to the one Caroline Ashford had. How do we know you didn't buy that locket online and create this entire story? Nora pulled the locket from beneath her shirt, holding it up. This locket was given to me at Cook County Orphanage in 1997 when I was 6 months old. Sister Catherine, the nun who gave it to me, testified yesterday. She confirmed it came with me when Jonathan Ashford dropped me off. The serial number on the back matches the one Margaret Ashford registered with her insurance company in 1996. You want to claim I faked that as an infant? The defense attorney had no response. The jury looked convinced. On day 18, Vivian took the stand in her own defense. It was a desperate move, but she had nothing left to lose. She admitted the embezzlement. I took the money because I believed I deserved it. Malcolm built his fortune on my sister's death. I thought I was owed compensation. She admitted planting the evidence. I panicked. I thought Nora was a con artist. I was trying to protect Malcolm. She admitted drugging Jasper. I didn't mean to hurt him. I just wanted him to sleep. I'm not good with children. I never have been. But she denied the pharmaceutical fraud. Those decisions were made by my board of directors. I had no knowledge of the falsified trials. The prosecution produced emails with Vivian's signature approving the fraudulent data. Her defense crumbled. On day 23, closing arguments began. The prosecutor was brief. The evidence speaks for itself. Vivian Cross committed these crimes knowingly and deliberately. She showed no remorse until she was caught. She deserves the maximum sentence. The defense was longer but equally futile. Harrison Blake tried to appeal to sympathy to frame Vivian as a tragic figure consumed by grief. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. The verdict came back guilty on all 47 counts. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Nora didn't attend, neither did Malcolm. They'd seen enough of courtrooms to last a lifetime. Instead, they were at the construction site of the first Evan Hartwell School, watching workers pour the foundation. It was February now, Chicago locked in the grip of winter, but the work continued. The school would open in September, 200 students, state-of-the-art facilities, teachers, fluent in ASL. Jasper ran across the muddy ground, his new winter coat bright against the gray sky. He'd gained 15 pounds, his face fuller, his eyes bright. Therapy was working. Love was working. Family was working. Wade called with the news. 25 years, no possibility of parole. Malcolm closed his eyes. Thank you. There's more. The judge ordered full restitution to victims. Cross Pharmaceuticals is being liquidated. Every asset will go toward compensation. Good. Wade's voice softened. It's over, Malcolm. You can rest now. Malcolm looked at Nora, at Jasper playing in the mud at the school rising from the ground. No, it's not over. It's just beginning. The Evan Hartwell School for the Deaf opened on September 12th, on a day when Chicago's summer humidity finally broke into cool autumn clarity. 200 students filled the classrooms, their hands moving in conversations that needed no voice to carry meaning. Nora stood at the dedication ceremony in a simple dress, blue the color of possibility, with Malcolm on one side and Jasper on the other. The boy had grown 4 inches over the summer, his face leaner, his signing confident and rapid. He'd been chosen as the student speaker, and his hands were eloquent as he described what it meant to be seen, to be heard, to matter. The audience, educators, parents, donors, survivors, watched in reverent silence. When Jasper finished, the applause was thunderous. He signed thank you and ran back to Nora, throwing his arms around her waist. Malcolm approached the podium. His speech was brief, his voice steady. My daughter once told me that silence has a voice. I didn't understand then. But watching these students, seeing their brilliance, I understand now. We don't need to fix them. We need to listen. More applause. Nora stepped forward to cut the ribbon. The scissors were heavy, ceremonial. She looked at the building brick and glass technology and hope and thought of Evan. This is for you, she signed to the sky, and for every kid who was told they were broken when they were always whole. The ribbon fell. The doors opened. Students poured inside, their excitement palpable. Jasper tugged Nora's hand. Can I show you my classroom? Lead the way. They walked through hallways painted in bright colors, past bulletin boards covered in student work, into a classroom where a teacher was setting up for tomorrow's lessons. Jasper pointed to a desk by the window. That's mine. And look, he showed her a nameplate someone had made, decorated with dinosaurs and stars. Jasper Ashford, future astronaut. Malcolm appeared in the doorway, his face soft with emotion he no longer tried to hide. Ready for the next surprise. They walked to the library, a soaring 2-story space with windows overlooking a garden. At the entrance stood a bronze plaque, the Margaret Eleanor Ashford Memorial Library. In honor of a woman who taught us that love doesn't ask permission, it risks everything for what matters. Nora's eyes burned. Malcolm's hand found hers. She'd be proud, he said quietly. Of you, of this, of the family we've built from the wreckage. I hope so. I know so. He squeezed her hand. Because you're just like her. Stubborn enough to change the world, compassionate enough to do it right. A woman approached early 40s, nervous energy, holding the hand of a small boy. Miss Hartwell, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had to thank you. My son David was on the wait list, and your scholarship program gave him a spot. He's been so alone, and now... Her voice broke. The boy signed shyly. Thank you for my school. Nora crouched down, signing back. Thank you for being brave enough to learn. You're going to do amazing things here. After the woman left, Malcolm touched Nora's shoulder. You know we can't scholarship every student. The foundation has limits. Nora looked at the building, at the students streaming through the doors, at Jasper waving from a window. Then we raise more money, build more schools, find more donors. Because every kid like David deserves this. Just like that. Just like that. We have the platform. They have the need. It's simple mathematics. Malcolm laughed, the sound young and unburdened. You sound like your mother. Good. I'll take that as the highest compliment. They stood together, watching students and families explore the new school, watching a dream become solid and real. Wade approached with a clipboard full of media requests. Every major news outlet wants interviews. The story's gone national. Billionaire's lost daughter builds school empire. They're calling you the next Malala. Nora shook her head. I'm not building an empire, I'm paying a debt. To who? To Evan. To every teacher who believed I was worth saving. To Margaret, who died so I could live. She looked at Malcolm. To a father who never stopped searching. Wade nodded and retreated. The sun was setting now, painting the school in gold and amber light. Families began to leave, promising to return Monday for the first day of classes. Jasper ran over, signing excitedly. Can we come back tomorrow? I want to meet the other kids. Malcolm signed, back, his movements now fluent after months of practice. School starts Monday. 2 more days to wait. That's forever. Nora laughed and signed. Then we'll make the days count. What do you want to do tomorrow? Jasper's face grew serious. His hands moved slowly, carefully. Can we visit Uncle Evan? I made him a drawing of the school. I want to show him. The request landed soft and devastating. Nora nodded, not trusting her voice. They visited the cemetery on Sunday, the 3 of them. Graceland Cemetery sprawled across 100 acres of old Chicago, where weathered monuments stood testament to lives long finished. Evan's grave was in a newer section, the headstone simple granite, Evan Michael Hartwell. 2003 to 2022. He taught us to listen. Nora brought white lilies. Jasper brought his drawing, a careful crayon rendering of the school with stick figures in every window, all of them smiling. Malcolm brought a photograph, Nora and Evan at the signing competition Evan had won when he was 16. Both of them laughing, hands frozen mid-conversation. They sat in the grass together. Nora touched the stone, her fingers tracing Evan's name. We did it, little brother. Built the school. Helped the kids. Made the world a little less loud for people like you. Jasper placed his drawing against the headstone, weighing it down with a smooth stone. He signed, Hi, Uncle Evan. I'm Jasper. I'm your nephew now. Nora says you were really smart and really brave. I want to be like you. Malcolm added the photograph to the small memorial. I never met you, Evan, but you raised my daughter when I couldn't. Thank you for that. Thank you for teaching her that love doesn't need sound to be heard. They sat in silence for a while, the October wind rustling through the old trees. Finally, Jasper signed, Is he happy where he is? Nora considered the question carefully. I think so. I think he's proud of us. And I think he's glad we found each other. Me too. Jasper leaned against her, his small body warm and solid. I'm glad you're my family. Me too, kiddo. Me too. As the sun began to set, they walked back to the car. Malcolm put his arm around Nora's shoulders, tentative at first, then firmer when she didn't pull away. I know I can't replace the years we lost, he said quietly, but I'd like to make the next ones count. We already are. Nora looked back at Evan's grave one last time. We're building something that lasts, something he'd be proud of. That's all any of us can do, leave the world a little better than we found it. Your mother used to say that. Then I'm in good company. They drove home as darkness fell over Chicago, the city lights spreading below them like a galaxy turned sideways. Jasper fell asleep in the back seat, his head pillowed on Nora's shoulder. Malcolm navigated the familiar streets, and for the first time in 27 years, felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. At the estate, they carried Jasper inside and tucked him into bed without waking him. Nora kissed his forehead and signed sweet dreams, even though his eyes were closed. In the hallway, she and Malcolm stood for a moment in comfortable silence. "Thank you," Malcolm said finally, "for giving an old man a second chance at family. Thank you for never giving up, for searching even when it seemed impossible." Nora hugged him, no longer awkward or uncertain. "For teaching me that some things are worth the fall. Your mother's words. Our words now." Malcolm nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start planning the second school." "Tomorrow." Nora smiled. "There's always tomorrow." She went to her room, not a guest room anymore, but home. On her nightstand sat the photograph of Evan and the last of Margaret's letters. She touched both, gently, two halves of her history learning to exist in the same space. Outside her window, Chicago glittered under a cold October moon. Somewhere in that city, 200 students were preparing for their first day at a school that hadn't existed 6 months ago. Somewhere, families were hopeful for the first time in years. Somewhere, a little boy was sleeping peacefully, knowing he was loved. And Nora Caroline, whoever she was becoming in the space between past and future, felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt like she was exactly where she belonged.